Hi everybody, how's it going? My name's Sky, and this is going to be the first video on my YouTube channel, Sky's Tales. Basically, it's just going to be, just different stories and tales from my life and different perspectival experiences. I have, even though I'm only 20 years old, I've done a lot of stuff. Um, from, hoodlum things when I was a kid to drugs. And basically, this channel is just to kind of provide an educational resource for people who don't understand it. I do not at all condone the use of drugs. I actually don't do drugs anymore. I'm a born again Christian. But I want to help give people some, like I said, an educational resource to help them out. And I thought, I would start today with one of the most intense experiences of my life. Um, and that was trying psilocybin mushrooms. I had tried them once before. I tried a small amount, or a considerably small amount, gram and a half. You know, um, I felt a little bit. It wasn't much, but this trip afterwards that I had, I I can't give an exact amount, but I tell people roughly that it was around 10 grams dried safely because the story of how it goes is I was with a buddy who I used to party with, and I was with my cousin, and I live in South Florida. So a lot of the fields around here in Southwest Florida are sprayed with calcium so that the mushrooms can't grow. So I had to travel about 30, 45 minutes away from my house to this field. It was a beautiful field too. I remember like it was like a giant grassland field, had these beautiful just hovering trees, like they were probably like where the leaves and the branches would end was probably like my height. Like I would have to duck under them and stuff. And there was like giant oases of water. And the cows were not afraid of us, yet they also weren't violent. They would just sit and watch and like they would walk by. It was pretty cool. And we went out there with, I would say, about 5 or 6 decent sized shopping bags. And we had only really found copperheads. Copperheads, they're really not they're not too potent, but they're like I guess on the middle of the scale you would say. And we got a large amount. We ended up leaving there. The dude I was with, he went home and measured the fresh, mushrooms, and he said it was around 400 grams wet, which a lot of people on here that have done mushrooms or experimented with them, they know that mushrooms, like let's say you have like 400 grams wet, that would equate to around 40 grams dry. And basically, what the guy did, me and my cousin waited at my house, and he made them into a tea and everything. And it ended up being like 2 decent sized water bottles. Each had around, I would say, 20 grams, each. And we went over there, excuse me, and my cousin and his friend, which is also my friend, I had actually known him longer, but that's another story. They had drinking, or drunk, I should say, one of the water bottles. They drank half. Each one got a half. And then, my cousin went to go drink the rest, or at least what he wanted to of the second bottle. But he didn't even get like a quarter of the way. And me being young and dumb, I was around, I'd say like 18, almost 19. I was just like, you know what, this is nothing. I've done mushrooms before. They're not strong. And I would say it was a mistake, but I didn't have a bad trip, you know, but essentially, like, I just took the water bottle and I chugged it. And I was thinking, yeah, this isn't going to be that bad. And so, we're sitting there, and it only had been like 20 minutes, and I also used to smoke weed and shit, so, we're sitting there, and, we're passing the bowl around and everything. It was okay. And, you know, my dude, he's like, hey, I got a little thing of spores. I got probably like a gram of spores. And spores are a lot more potent than mushrooms. And I was like, okay, no problem. He's like, you want some? I was like, yeah, sure, you know. So I go up, to go to his fridge, and I get to the fridge, open it up, I drink it and everything, and as soon as I close the fridge door, it hit me. It hit me so hard. As soon as it hit me, I knew I was in for a trip. Everything just boom, like, the wall was probably like 5 feet away from me, but it looked like it was like a mile away. And I started smiling. I was like, ooh, this is gonna be good, back then. And there was this lady, like one of his friends, sitting, because like the way the kitchen was set up, there was like this wall where like the washer was on the other end of it. And like I had seen her in the reflection of like the sliding glass door they had. And it was ridiculous. It was so funny. I was just laughing, just like hysterically, and I don't even know why it was funny. And I walked back and everything, and they were like, "What was so funny?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I thought I seen somebody." Turns out she was there, and she walked by and she was giving me like this weird look because I don't think she knew I was actually tripping on mushrooms. And I was surprised how quickly things escalated in the trip. Like people who have tripped before with acid, shrooms, deter, anything, they know that it comes in waves. There's like these waves. Like there'll be a lot of activity that'll. It won't necessarily have that final peak or like that. What a lot of them know as that peak, but it kind of peaks and then it'll go down and then it'll come back up and like peak again a little bit and go back down all the way until it gets to the grand peak, and then it goes down, and then it you know goes until it ends. Well, I was sitting there, and within like a couple of minutes the walls were breathing, like not just like with tripping like normally, like they were breathing and they were like dripping, like they were wet, and this was awesome to me, and my visual was kind of like fisheyed, I guess you could say, like if you had a fisheye lens in front of a camera. And so we're sitting there and it's getting, more and more intense, and like the visuals are starting to get unique and everything. Like I'm starting to see like lines of color come through there, now and again. And, I had the idea, hey guys, let's go outside, because I had heard tripping outside is awesome. Like it's a beautiful experience. And the people who told me that were right. It was a very beautiful experience. I remember walking out, and what I seen was I looked at the ground, and I looked at the grass, and there was these flowers that were coming up out of the ground. They were the most beautiful flowers I had ever seen. They were changing, like they were rainbow, but it wasn't like in the sense that you would think. They'd be red, then green, then blue, then yellow. They were changing colors, and there was like this like magic dust, I call it, that was like coming off of them, and the grass and even the tree that was in his front yard. I looked up. I looked up into the sky, and I seen this cloud. The cloud morphed into a dragon, and it had two full moons for eyes. And it opened up its mouth, and another dragon with two full moons for eyes came out, and it blew my mind. I remember sitting there just like, what? I looked at my cousin. I was like, don't you see that dragon up there? And he said he did, but everyone's trip is different. He could have seen a dragon, but it was something different. The thing about tripping is it's all about your mind. Because it's basically just subconscious recreations. It's kind of like being awake, but you're dreaming. And that's actually how one of my friends described it. And, so after a while I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden I had this thought that I was Cell from Dragon Ball Z. And, like, it felt and looked like I had turned into Cell. Like, first form Cell, if any of you Dragon Ball Z fans know, I'm kind of an anime geek, so, you know, and I was still walking around like, oh, I need your bioenergy and shit. And, like, my cousin came up and he was acting goofy. I was like, nah, man, get away. But, yeah, so we go inside and it's getting really intense. Like, this was getting ridiculously intense. Like, I would sit there and, like, I would see, like, things that weren't there. Like, there was, like, a triangle. that morphed into a circle, that morphed into like a plane, that morphed into other objects. Like it was just a continuous morphing of objects. And I was just so amazed, and like there was these physical waves coming through in my vision. And like there was times where it looked like it was like sepia colored, and like it was getting like I wasn't overwhelmed because when you take that high of an amount, it's hypnotic. You really don't have you really don't have control. Like you have very little, very, very, very little, you know. And it was just it took me in, and I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I got the blending of senses that people talk about. Like where people talk about like, oh, like I can smell colors or taste sounds and stuff like that. And everyone's is different, like I was saying. Mine was like, okay, like let's say if I tasted something that you couldn't physically taste, it would be like there was in my mind's eye, I could see like water driplets on my tongue, and it was like, and like they would make like a water driplet sound. They would just and like come up like that. And if I heard something that you can't physically hear, it'd be the same thing. It was like I was looking into my eardrum and seeing the same thing. And like there was like a taste and a sound and a smell and stuff to it all. But when you're like my experience is a lot different from others because like a lot of people when they take that high amount, they're not really cognitive. They don't remember a lot. I'm a very cognitive person as it is. I'm a very conscious person, so it was all vivid to me. And yeah, and I'm sitting there and like I'm experiencing all this, and then all of a sudden like everything started glitching out. Like if you're watching a computer video or like you have a scratched up DVD that you have in a DVD player, and like it gets all ugly and like like all messy looking and like cut. There's a lot of cuts in it. That's exactly how my vision was, looking. And I'm sitting there and like there's all these cuts, and it was crazy. And like I said, I wasn't afraid. Like I was actually like having a really cool time. I thought this was all amazing. And there was one part after this that messed with me a little bit. Um, Basically, like my mom had passed a couple years ago, so I'm very respectful to like mothers and stuff because like it's very deep to me. It gets to my core. Like I had treated my mother with a lot of disrespect, and I still think about it and stuff, and I get into very introspective thought about it. But I'm just gonna leave it at that. And basically, dude's mom comes home. She was a super nice lady. She was very polite, and she was even like packing bowls for us of weed, and we were sitting there in a circle smoking, right? And we're having a good time, and uh, buddy's mom, or my buddy, was being real disrespectful to his mom. Sitting there telling her to shut up and calling her a dumb bitch, and like it was pretty, when you're tripping it, it gets pretty intense, and I started thinking about it, you know, and I thought about my mom, and then all of a sudden, it was like my vision just tilted, and like I heard this noise, like in like okay, like in a horror movie where you hear the "Beow," that's exactly what happened. It was like "Beow," and just like everything like tilted, and the walls completely melted away. And I'm sitting there, and for some reason, like I don't think I was thinking about spiders, but I looked at my arm, and there was spiders underneath my skin, like a bunch of them, and they were just crawling around and like biting me, and like it felt so crazy, and I was sitting there, shaking because it was so intense. I didn't. This is when it started to get a little south. Um, it felt like 5 minutes to me, but I guess my cousin said it was more like an hour. I sat there just staring off, shaking. And after a while, I had enough. I was done, and I was like, dude, I need to go home. And before this, I had been wanting to go home. It didn't, mess with my trip at all. When dude was like, nah, nah, stay, and like it didn't mess with it. I was having a good time. But I did want to be by myself, to have like deep introspective thought because I took them for the sole purpose of getting deep down, and trying to figure out things about myself and figure out problems and such. And so I ran outside, and my cousin comes out. He's like, "What's wrong, man? What's wrong?" I was like, "I can't be here. I can't. Dude's disrespecting his mother. I can't. I can't deal with that." And so buddy of mine, or old buddy of mine, he was like, "Okay, yeah, I'll take you home." And so we get in his car, and he was purposely trying to mess with me. Like, even my cousin said it later on, because like I thought, oh, maybe it's just I'm tripping and like I'm not perceiving it right. No, even my cousin was saying like, yeah, he was being a jerk because he had heard what I had said. He would like speed up the car real fast, and he was like turning the music up and down. And in the back of my mind, I knew, so it didn't bother me. And then dude was sitting there saying stuff like, "Oh, if you have a bad trip, oh, there's something not right with you," which I know is not right at all, because I've met a lot of people, I've known a lot of people who are completely normal in the sense of societal, in the societal sense, and they've had bad trips, and so I get home and everything, and I'm doing good now, like I'm actually having a good time. I'm sitting there watching. If any of you guys have watched Off the Air on Adult Swim, it's late at night. I'm not sure if they even still play it, but yeah, what? I'm sitting there and I'm watching it and everything, and there's this video that came up. But before that had happened, something just it was insane. Like, I believe I had an out of body experience, because all of a sudden I had this urge, or not really an urge, but like a need to close my eyes, and I closed my eyes, and it felt like I was gone. Like, there wasn't even me, there was nothing, and I'm sitting there, and, like, there was this green ball of light, and it was telling me, like, oh, we're all beings of love, and we need to love each other, and, we need to try to help one another, because we live in a dark and hopeless world. And it blew my mind away. It completely blew my mind away. Like, I had heard people talk about Satori enlightenment. I don't believe it's necessarily enlightenment or nirvana, but it was just a deep understanding. It's like I seen the world holistically, the whole picture, instead of getting caught on the details like we tend to do, and, I come out of it, and this video starts. It's called The Music Scene by the Blockheads. And it touched me. Even to this day, like, I watch the video, and sometimes I'll even have a flashback of that moment, watching the video, because it's so deep. It's about essentially there's this TV monitor, and it's sitting there, and it's trying to control humans. It's trying to merge technology with humanity, and it's trying to do that even with nature, but the animals won't give into it. So it sends this beam down, and it dissects them apart into these beautiful colors and shapes. And I remember when I had seen those shapes, it just blew my mind. I sat there and I was like, "What? This is possible?" Like, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just completely captivated by this. And I understood the message that it was saying, that with technology can seriously warp our minds. It is a propaganda tool. It is a device for indoctrination. And it is brainwashing. I know a lot of people out there are going to be like, "Whoa, well, that's not true." But the thing is, the U.S. even has patents on television sets that you can go and look up. I can't tell you the exact number, but if you were to just go on Google and be like, "U.S. patent on televisions," you will find it. And it basically talks about how they send waves that they're like alpha waves, and they put our brains into an alpha wave state, which is kind of like this mind control state, where they're able to sit there and program you. I mean, think about it. That's why they call TV programs programs. They're sitting there programming your mind. And this is when I really started becoming conscious of everything around me. And from that experience, it changed my life. Like I said, though, I don't condone the use of drugs. I don't condone the use of psilocybin. In fact, not from psilocybin, but from another trip experience with another substance. I have HPPD, which is hyper persistent, or was it what was it? It's like hallucination perception persistent disorder, or it might be hallucination persistent perception disorder. And basically, what that is like, it's not like I'm tripping all the time, but like, okay, I'll sit there and I'll see something that's not actually there sometimes, or I'll hear something that's not actually there, or smell things or taste things that aren't there. Um, it's a very rare thing, you know, but that's honestly one of the reasons why you shouldn't. And not only that, you can understand these things without the use of psychedelic drugs. You know, not only that, too, psilocybin is known if you already have pre-existing mental conditions, it can exacerbate them and bring them out. Like, for example, I had manic depression, but not really that bad until that trip. Now it's, I would say on the severe end, but I deal with it, like everybody else. Everyone has their quirks, everyone has their problems, that we all got to deal with, that we all got to try to work with. Um, but yeah, like I said, this video and the rest of these videos that are going to be coming are just um, basically they're for educational purposes. I want people to understand what drugs can do. I want people to understand what, especially psychedelics, can do to the mind. And a lot of people have this misconception that their mind expanding, but really they're mind altering. They don't expand the mind in the sense that we think they do, like, or that we think they do. Like, yes, they create neurons, like connections between neurons in the brain, um, that normally would not be made. But the thing is, are those neurons necessarily a good thing? Maybe we are designed not to have certain neurons connect to each other. Because with HPPD, like I said, it can produce that, or it can exacerbate mental illnesses. You know, um, but like I said, yes, I don't condone drugs. In fact, in my opinion, just from my uh, very history past with them, just to stay away from them. They cause a lot of health problems. They cause a lot of mental problems. They confuse you. Because you're introduced to things that you wouldn't normally be introduced to, and you become confused about it. You're like, well, what does this mean? You know, but yeah, it's drugs are just a crazy thing. They're a very intense experience. And it's one of those things that if you've never done them before, I can't really describe to you what they do or how it feels or what it looks like, because it's not just the visual aspect. There's an emotional aspect to it. It's essentially like, I know it's different for other people, but for me, when I do mushrooms or when I did mushrooms, it was like somebody took like a magnifying glass and put it real close to all my emotions. It made me feel, it brought out who I was truly as a person, you know, and it can be an intense experience. You can get PTSD from it. Like, I remember after this trip, for a whole month, it was terrible. Like, I would try to think about something else and I couldn't. I could only think about, that trip. Like, I would sit there at work, mopping the floors when I used to work at 7-Eleven, and it would just boom, like, I would get thrown right back into it. Like, almost it felt like I was there. And it took me a while to get back to normal. I actually had lost my mind for a while, but I've regained the little bit of sanity I have. I'm not going to lie, there still is a little bit that's out there somewhere. You know, um, the thing that it showed me personally, and I've heard a lot of people talk about, is that, because when I was younger, I didn't understand the spiritual aspects of this dimensional space we live in. Because as humans, we're so accustomed to, oh, we believe what we see or what we hear. We basically are controlled by our senses. And when you do something like a psychedelic, especially in a high amount, it shows you the spiritual aspect of things. It really shows you that there is something more to this world than what we think there is on a material level. And after that, after that trip, it made me like that thought was in my mind, there's got to be something more than this. And I had spent a couple years, very, very hardcore into New Age and meditation, Wiccan practices, studying every pagan belief, every ancient, religion, every modern day religion, whether major or minor. Like I had tried to find the truth. But that is for another video. I will probably end up discussing that here soon in another video. But, like I said, I just want people to know and to understand what drugs can actually do to your mind, your body, and your soul. And it's just a crazy thing. Well, I've already wasted about like 26 minutes. So I hope y'all have a good day, and may the Lord bless you and keep you. God bless.